When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some of we shouldn't.
He turned out to be a completely unreliable asshole.
Take it away, boys.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
And hello, everyone listening. Thanks for being here to what she just said, here to Dismembering Horror. All right, Tim, what are we doing today?
Hanging out, just relaxing, shooting some b-ball outside of the school.
We got a movie to talk about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're doing that.
Let's talking talk about a movie. The, what was it, 13th installment of the Halloween franchise?
Yes, 13th. Lucky 13.
Yes, the finale to the Blumhouse trilogy of the rebooted, revamped, revived Halloween films. We've covered the first two, Halloween, Halloween Kills, and now we're ending it appropriately with Halloween Ends.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else before we jump into it?
I don't know. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween, everyone. It's a Halloween episode. It's been fun, actually, I think, having Halloween movies. Well, let's see. It was last year, then missed a couple years, and then anyway, we've had these movies to look forward to for
That's right.
a handful of Halloweens now. It's been fun. And no more until
ever again. They're done. This was the last one. They're never going to make another Halloween movie.
Time will tell, Tim.
Oh.
We'll see what Malek Akkad does. The rights have returned to him.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It's no more Blumhouse films is what Mr. Blum is saying. Anyways, all right. Well, we're already talking about it. So let's talk about it even more. And we can get in the groove and the mode here, or as we like to do, by watching the trailer. So here we go. Directed by David Gordon Green. Written by Paul Brad Logan, Chris Bernier, Danny McBride. All right, he's still on it. And David Gordon Green. Halloween Ends.
Come on, let's go. Come and get me, motherfucker.
And there we have it, folks. Wow. All right.
Wow.
So next, after the trailer, we like to rate these films we watch per our rating system. Would Tim and myself tell ourselves to avoid, stream, rent, or buy Halloween Ends?
What I would like to know is, what did I say for the last two? Because I own the original, so that's a buy.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I would say buy for the 2018?
I know you said buy for the last one.
Yeah. So I am going to stay consistent for once.
Great.
I'm a buy. I like it. See, we can talk about, obviously, the differing opinions that are out there about this, but I thought it was great. So everybody else is wrong.
Okay, so you're just referring to, it seems like maybe we have kind of a Last Jedi on our hands, especially with this one, even more than Kills.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe we'll discover it, but it doesn't feel like it's getting hyped up, or people, like, I'm not hearing anybody talking about it overtly. Like, it's certainly not getting the, like, oh my God, this is amazing. What a great finale treatment that you might have expected.
I'm hearing a lot of people talk about it, but not saying good things.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But, whatever.
I had a friend say he's sounded like his opinion was malleable. He wasn't quite sure what to think of it, kind of needed to see it again. And then I have another friend who, like us, really enjoyed it. I can read his review and summary.
Cool.
Great. All right. Yeah, I agree. This is... I'd prefer to buy it in a box set, though.
Absolutely, yeah.
But for the sake of ease, yeah, man, just new slasher movies, fun. This was a great conclusion, I thought. So if I said buy it to the others, then I'm going to say it for this one, too. All right. Well, could you summarize this film for us? Get us all on the same page?
Sure.
Maybe plug the naysayers into how Tim viewed this film?
Yes. I would start by saying that we are bridging some time here, and we go back to 2019, which, let's figure this out real quick. Not the original. So the first in this trilogy took place in 2018, marking 40 years, after the original events. So it's a direct sequel to the original Halloween. We pick up in 2018, Halloween night, all sorts of fun stuff goes down, and then we pick up the following night in the sequel, correct? Or is it a year later?
Oh, in Halloween Kills?
Yeah.
It's the same night.
It's the same night. That's right. Okay. So, and then we carry into the following day, I think. Okay. Either way, it doesn't really matter. So, everything happened in 2018 in the first two films. So, we start this movie a year later, 2019, once Michael Myers has kind of seemingly just like disappeared after all of the events of that evening. And we meet a kid, like whatever, 20-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid named Corey.
He's old enough to buy alcohol.
Oh, there you go. That's right. So he's named Corey. He is babysitting a young kid named Jeremy. And Jeremy's a little bit of a punk. And they, antics ensue. Jeremy locks Corey in the attic. And then upon freaking out and trying to get out of the attic, Corey kicks the door open, hitting Jeremy and knocking him down a few flights over the banister, and he dies essentially in front of his parents. And so Corey becomes this sort of central character to the rest of the movie in that he's a pariah, like people, he wasn't convicted of murder, but or manslaughter, I guess it would be. But the town kind of feels like he's a sketchball, and the theme is sort of that the town assigned this kind of like anger and fear toward him that Michael Myers disappearing, the void that left was sort of just pushed into or onto Corey to some degree. So he's become a bit of a, what would you call him? A misanthrope.
Yeah.
And he kind of has a shit life. And we jump to 3 years later when, our lead final girl from the previous movies, Allison, and Laurie are living together now. They're, Allison's mom and Laurie's daughter have been killed. And so they're supporting each other. But Allison also feels this sense of, what would you call it? Displacement. She doesn't feel like she belongs. She's in her own way a pariah in that she's like the survivor of this thing, much like Laurie. And so she feels out of place too. And she sees that commonality when she meets Corey and they kind of hit it off. So then we get a series of sort of interesting events where Corey's kind of being bullied a lot. Allison's trying to like pursue him as, her interest in him, and he's rejecting that to a certain degree. And he comes across Michael, essentially, who's been hiding out this whole time in a sewer drain, storm drain kind of thing. And maybe in their interaction, some magic happens. You can make that argument. But at the very least, Corey feels kind of imbued with the spirit of Michael. Whether or not that's self-created or supernatural, who knows? And he starts seeking out some revenge and retribution, I guess, toward people that he feels has wronged him. So he's at the very least spurred on to go after people because he's now seen Michael Myers and also didn't get killed by Michael. Michael's in a sort of almost hibernative state in this little sewer drain. He's still very wounded. But Corey starts bringing him new victims. And it seems almost like anytime Michael kills somebody, it like gives him a little bit more life. At least adrenaline. If you want to take everything very non-supernatural literal, I think that's the angle you would go with. That he's emboldened every time he kills.
But you could really say it either way.
You can, totally. I think that's the debate, some of the debate that's going on. Anyway, meanwhile, Laurie is like, that kid's sketchy about Corey. I don't want him dating my granddaughter. That creates a rift between Allison and Laurie. And turns out, Laurie was right. Corey goes pretty psychotic. He clumsily attempts to sort of become a Michael Myers-esque killer. We'll talk about why he is not. And this leads to him effectively leading Michael to Laurie and Allison, really to Laurie. And they have a pretty intense finale of, Laurie has to kind of bait and switch Michael, and she has to fend off Corey, and then Allison there's a big shocker moment of Allison stepping in right after Corey has decided that he, instead of killing Laurie, is going to just kill himself and become some sort of weird martyr, and like, who knows? And then Michael and Laurie go toe to toe, and guess what? Laurie wins.
Woo!
Finally.
After all these years.
And they put him in a giant-sized paper shredder.
Yep. More or less. All right, great. I think that summarized things fully, so we can move on.
That's the movie.
Whether you saw it or not. We hope you saw it. We haven't said it for a while, but the spirit of our show is you've just kind of watched the film. It's fresh in your mind. Let's all sit down and dismember it together, and dismember it we will right now with our first section, What Worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, Ryan,
I guess just to start at the beginning, because I mean that can be a good in a lot of the times here. And I want to set up my movie going experience here where,
oh boy,
Friday night, I was thinking, okay, I'll go see this Monday before we record, no rush to see it. But then I thought, oh, you know what? I could catch the late showing at Grauman's Chinese Theater in IMAX. I knew I wanted to rewatch Halloween Kills first. I'm like, I could catch that and still rewatch it because a friend was talking to me, oh, we're going to go see it tonight. So that just kind of planted the seed and got me excited. So I did my whole thing, watched Halloween Kills, did my traditional walk down the boulevard, and made it to this 10 o'clock showing, which is late for me these days, of Halloween Ends. And it was great. I had another experience that was kind of like a big return to theater screening that I had there when I went and saw the new James Bond movie and just got totally like caught up in movie mode with all the James Bondness and the opening and all that. And it was just so much fun to have that again with this film, where, I mean, something that's so great overall about this movie is really having no idea where they were going to go with it. So that's where I'm at too. Like, and that can be looked at so many ways. How many years later it was going to be? Was it going to be years later at all? How were they going to continue to toe that line of things being supernatural or not? And then my biggest sort of almost requirement or curiosity for whether it was going to succeed or not is continuing all the ideas and themes set up in specifically more so the previous one, Halloween Kills. All these meditations on evil. So the first scene, and I was sitting, got my primo seats. It was great. I was just so into it. Like when it did the cut to the titles, and it was like Michael Myers was only there in so much as we, along with Corey, were afraid that this was the opening scene,
right,
where he was going to get us, so to speak. All we knew then was that maybe Corey was just the first guy to get killed or whatever, I had no idea.
Well, and what we can say for sure is that regardless of reality, Michael's spirit is in that scene, right? And I don't mean literally, but like the characters are bringing Michael into the scene in their minds. Like the undercurrent of fear around Michael coming back, because it's now been a year since the last time he was seen, is in that entire sequence. And it motivates pretty much everything that goes on. So he's there even though he's not there.
Yeah, like we fully get why he's freaking out so much, and it's just kind of fun where him as someone who's living with a real Michael Myers and us in the mode of watching this as a movie and expecting him. So just when it did the thing, it from the get-go continued that theme of like through our own fear that was sort of initially set in by, how many, the 41 years ago before Halloween night, all this trauma that this whole town's been going through, that's immediately present when it cuts to credits. You're like, oh my God, it's doing that. And it was the coolest thing. It was so unexpected too, to do that. So it was that kind of just sweet spot, what you want from movies, unexpected, but doing exactly what you want, just in a way you didn't expect perfectly.
Yeah, subverting the expectation, but maintaining the world and all of the good themes.
So man, when the credits kicked up, and also I was always looking forward to how they continue the jack-o'-lantern thing.
I love that.
Right?
It's so cool.
What are they going to do different each time? Just the music was blasting, and it was so loud seeing it at this theater.
So loud in the theater that we went to as well. We were like, oh my God.
Good. And I'm glad you saw it in theaters too. I think that had a lot to do with it. Maybe not. But I mean, just more on that opening scene too. The parents, I thought were like, it was really done, well done how they were acting. I thought it was because like the theme throughout this, which is like so many horror movies, we're always coming back to this, and this movie is just so blatantly about it, is the inherited trauma, evil being passed forward. In what forms do evil exist? How does it pass on? So just immediately you could kind of get the sense with these parents that they are just kind of little stress balls, or maybe you could get how they could raise a little troublemaker.
Oh yeah.
And then to have it, just from the get go. Okay, well, it's like feels like the kid's fault from one angle, that led to his own demise. Like he faked being murdered. Like come on. He knows about this town's history. He's old enough to at least know that. So just from that whole scene was doing that from the get-go of not being able to easily place who is at fault there.
Well, and also I really like this style of sort of setup that the undercurrent of what Michael's existence has done to everybody is seen in sort of different ways. So the parents, the mom in particular, is sort of projecting the fear of Michael onto her kid and saying, oh, he's really freaked out lately. He's wetting the bed. He's doing all these things. And she's saying it's because of Michael. Like he's afraid of Michael. Now, how much it actually is sort of undercut by then him being like, once the parents are out the door, being like, I want to watch a scary movie. So it's like...
And he says, oh, I'm not afraid of Michael. He only kills babysitters, not the kids.
That's right. So it's sort of this, again, this inherited and projected fear that's happening with her generation, because they more so lived through it, and how that infects everything, right? And then the kid is, you know, he's acting out for various reasons that we don't really need to know. It's just, you know, kids act out. They do things in opposition to what their boundaries are, and you know, they push those to see what they can get away with. So in a weird way, the kid is kind of playing into the fervor as well by being like, oh, I can scare this babysitter by, you know, carrying the torch of this lore along because everybody's so affected by it. And so you've got this really nice push-pull. It's like nobody's really at fault, but everybody's kind of, they're all at the mercy almost of the trauma that exists in the town.
Mm-hmm. Just to go broaden, I want to check in where you're at too, with kind of like your expectations going into the supernatural side of it all. Like, because we had that ending with Kills where it seemed like he should be dead, like if he was a regular human, right? But then gets back up and sort of has this, feels like superhuman final murder of that, you know, kills off the whole posse, right?
Yeah. I still think that it's just enough that you can argue, like we see in the world, you see these examples of people seemingly doing superhuman things because of circumstance, adrenaline, like whatever. And I think you can still apply that. You can get away with that explanation still. And this movie, I feel like, kind of confirms it in a way. He is still just a human being in that he's incredibly wounded, right? 3 years later, and he's living in a hole and can barely do anything. So, like, the effects of that, to me, that says he's a human. He, like, is unusually strong and, like, you know, can take a lot. But it's not superhuman to me.
Yeah.
It's right on that, like, edge.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine.
And that's just, there's the broad thing that I just thought worked so well, was thinking like, okay, maybe this is going to go a crazy direction where they really do embrace he's like zombie Michael Myers, or just you knew they were going to do something.
That would be crazy, but yeah.
They had to do something bold and make a choice for this one. We knew, right? And as far as the writing the supernatural line, I thought it was spot on, because it's exactly what it did the whole time, was just ride that line.
Yeah, and it offers up an opportunity as the viewer to kind of say, I get to choose, in a way, my interpretation, because it's not overt in one direction or the other. And I think that's really smart. And maybe what people are annoyed by, they want something that's more concrete. I don't know. But I liked that, the sort of the ambiguity of it. And like how it also then thematically extends to the other characters, in particular Corey, because it is still like the whole movie is sort of about the effect on people that what Laurie would consider pure evil, this thing that she repeats quite often, how the pure evil affects everybody else. And it does, right? But it doesn't turn other people into pure evil. It turns them into a sort of a lesser version of evil, a version that is influenced by pure evil, but not pure in and of itself. And I think that's a really cool place to live in for the film, because then everybody is in that construct. Even Allison, like, her motivations are it's causal, right? Like why she wants what she wants is based on the effect that the pure evil that Michael has had on her and everybody else.
Mhm.
So to me, this movie is more about effect. It's not about, I don't know what people wanted, but like I guess they wanted the first Halloween movie again. And it's like, why? I don't need that.
Okay, if we're getting into other
Sorry.
referring to other people's complaints about it, the first one I heard was a guy who I like him a lot. He reviews physical media and stuff, and is a huge fan of this series. But it was that you had someone else put on his mask and kill in it. It felt like sacrilegious to him. And I'm trying to think of.
I don't know why people have such a purity around this type of stuff. It's like, who like the cop put his mask on in the first one, and he got his head caved in. Like.
Well, another thing my friend said, which is just so funny because it was the opposite reaction. He said, "Right, I think this is just all like a long con of you trolling me," because he said. All the interesting thematic things that it had set up, it didn't do any of which. And I'm like, that's exactly why I loved it. I thought it did that from the get-go, like we talked about with that opening scene.
Yeah. Wait, what? I disagree.
Well, he's not here, so sorry if you're listening.
Yeah, I just think that like one of the things that I think people are kind of coming up against is that I think that there is a tendency for people to want each movie to feel like the last. And that's, I think, not the right way to go in. Because to me, the first movie to the second movie are very different. And obviously purposefully. The first one feels like a reintroduction to where Laurie's state of mind is and how that's going to play out. The second one is totally off the rails insanity. It's just like Michael on the loose for real. And it's like Michael against the town. It's this bigger theme of like society. And the third one kind of returns back to how do you deal with trauma and the effect that trauma has.
Yeah.
And I think that is appropriate in a trilogy. It's like that seems like the logical place to be in. And then I think what is working about this movie is that it adds in framing things about the effect that this trauma has, we get more in depth in a character way of somebody that is new to us, but involved with the overarching, story and the core characters of Laurie and Allison. And I think that seems right to me. I don't know why people I don't know why they want something else or what the something else necessarily is. So that's for them to speak about.
There was a complaint that you had these two characters and that you didn't do them justice at all with this one or something like that. Or
meaning
that was
Allison and Laurie?
Yeah, which
the whole movie is that.
That's what, right? So
do they want Allison and Laurie to be out there like hunting Michael?
I think it would do more with their characters. I don't know. I can try to find the specific quote. I thought this was interesting, kind of is just echoing what you said. A Reddit user named Super Anonymous Bosch said, Halloween 2018 is Laurie's movie. Halloween Kills is Haddonfield's movie. Halloween Ends is Evil's movie. I mean, it's a fun way to put
cool.
it,
Sure.
I thought. But I thought it was so smart to have it set a few years later and actually be in a different place with Allison and Laurie, where you can tell, like, it's not like they haven't been affected by all they went through, but at least they feel like they've worked through it in that way where it's like, okay, it's nice to see, Laurie's just not all out drunk anymore.
Right.
She's like, they're living together. Allison seems to be like doing well on the up and up and is really together, but not in a way that speaks down to what they've been through or feels unrealistic. So you're kind of so it's just so much better than as if we had just picked up the same night and he's just more entangled fight, like whatever. That was the first movie and the second movie to an extent. So to have it sort of settle into that point where we're at with the characters, but you still have that Halloween-esque pervasive just foggy discomfort and evil is somewhere.
Yeah.
I thought it was great coming into where we did with their characters, and kind of like what you're just saying, so smart to have then a new character be the sort of crux of that continuation of that theme. Because I mean, what else they've been handled the perfect amount, I thought, Laurie and Allison.
Yeah, and I think that they're like we said, this is the 13th Halloween movie.
And the third one in this, which is
right.
It's kind of crazy to think about, like we have, with these series where they're kind of known for, they have to make bold choices somehow as they go on.
Right.
Whether it's like in the Friday the 13th with the whole Tommy Jarvis saga and like more supernatural stuff. And then same with Halloween, just like the choices it makes, all the supernatural stuff with that too.
Yeah.
So you just think, what are they going to do to keep it in the same grounded world? And I just thought they were so successful in doing that. It's incredible.
I also think that there's something about the filming of this one that felt even more 80s than the other two, which I loved. Like the shots of Corey on the motorcycle.
I love those. Yeah.
With and without Allison. Like every single time I was like, I'm like immediately transported to this vibe from the 80s. And I'm like, I'm not even sure exactly why, but it seems so iconic and such of that era. There's also, of course, the classic like long lens zoom ins that we've come to sort of be familiar with this, but it is also a trope of the 70s and 80s, that long lens telephoto lens sort of zoom in rather than push in. Right. And I just love the feel of it, the eeriness that the whole first half of the movie has. Because truthfully, there really aren't that many kills in the first half of the movie, right?
Pretty much the exact midpoint is when he lures the cop,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's old school, sort of structure. So to me,
also, it builds that tension
right.
again, because we've just had these two big movies. Yeah.
Going back to that style feels like the appropriate place to be. Because if you take these movies as a quadrilogy, is that how you call it?
Sure.
Yeah. And you say that the bookends of these four movies are the 78 Halloween and now this one, you do want to feel like you're coming back to that sort of era, at least stylistically and sort of in like the feel of it all. And I think it accomplished that. And I was like really, really into that how that felt.
It can be in subtle filmmaking ways. Like you look at, there's the big choices nowadays of how much do you use cell phones, iPhones. Good job at keeping those pretty low on the radar. And then like the COVID's the big one too nowadays. How much are they going to kind of address it or that? And it felt like it totally just kind of worked around that. It's like, okay, great. But it worked for it.
I mean, and likely in small town, every town USA, that is the vibe. That it's not really at the front like it is in big metropolitan areas of like signs everywhere and still the holdover from those 2 years.
Yeah.
Because even now I'm like, I go, where was I today or yesterday? And there are, stickers on the floor. Oh, it was a Halloween store I went into, like a costume store. And they had a ton of that, like plexiglass up and like, please social distance and stickers on the floor. And I was like, oh shit, like this place is still in that mode when the vast majority of everywhere else is not.
Right. And especially when you're watching this film, you see whatever this town is, you're like, yeah, this town seems like it'd just be like this now.
Yeah.
Want to read what my friend wrote when I said, well, what did you like about it? Because I was excited that someone else really liked it and he can riff on this. Feel like he'd want to stay anonymous. Hope he doesn't mind me reading it, though. I liked how the filmmakers seemed set to make it as divisive as possible while also staying true to the themes they'd been exploring in the first two. I genuinely had no idea what to expect for about 2/3 of the movie, which is great. Loved the love story and the multiple romantic shots of the motorcycle riding. Yeah. The opening was fucking fantastic. The darkly gruesome end with the whole town uniting to see Michael destroyed was a fitting testament to humanity's inability to resolve problems other than through violence. Yeah, it's kind of... That was a big one to continue from the second one.
Yeah.
Loved all the obnoxious / clever cuts between scenes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To the point of the funeral procession, and we're like jumping
it
around
felt
here.
like that, yeah.
It was a funeral procession, right? Like it really was. And I think that the ritual of that and having that be the way it ends makes total sense as well. And the statement of like, no, like we can't just get rid of him here. We need the town to see this. And so
and the audience too.
Yes, this whole thing is about the effect and then the necessary closure in order to move on, which is really is the whole theme of this trilogy. 40 years later, they still hadn't resolved anything, and that specter comes back because they can't get over it in a lot of ways. I mean, really, that's what it is. Remember that in the first one, not the original, but the first one of this trilogy, the reason Michael gets out effectively is because two reporters can't let it go. That the specter of this event 40 years earlier is still coming back and haunting people. And so that leads to sort of a series of events that re-ups him being out and around.
It's cool with this and how it worked out so well with the story where it's more than just in the sense of violence begets violence, things affect for time. It's definitely that through and through, but it really works having it be this later and having it be, older Laurie Strode here and some of the other characters in it. In that, I like to think, we're moving further and further away, and we're evolving, for lack of a better word, into like acknowledging how violence works in this way. You can't cure violence with violence, kind of thing. And that's something we talked about a lot, I'm sure, with Halloween Kills, and that explores of what the mob is doing and how anger and evil and violence proliferates all that way.
Totally.
Yet we have now this older generation here who's still around, still was affected by this firsthand. It almost feels like they're more allowed because they're still of this time in a way. It's like the idea of like an old World War II guy hunting down one last Nazi or something.
Sure.
Somehow feels like more forgivable, or we get it or whatever.
Well, there's also this sort of angle too of how. Let me see if I can articulate this well. Laurie represents a generational trauma, right? She is the persona that's carrying that generational trauma. And she, as a character in this movie, is doing everything she can to move on from that, to find closure for herself when closure really doesn't exist. And so she's gotten a haircut and she's gotten a new house, and she's actually therapizing through this trauma by writing about it. Like, she's doing the work that you want to do. But the town is not able to allow her to do that fully.
At least easily. They're giving her a hard time still.
That's right. And so that's, again, kind of this representation of how trauma infects everything. And even if you as the individual are working through it, the ripple effect still exists. And so you're not just having to come to terms with it for yourself. Like, you have to kind of, in a way, Laurie has to, she's tasked with more than just her individual self-growth.
Right. Well, what I was so interested in, of the themes set up in this one and how they're going to continue it in this one, that's why I was kind of setting up too, why it almost feels like it's more allowable for someone older to be going through these things and wrestling these things, is because I'm still going, well, how justified is he? How much do I agree with the morality of the all-out violence, or just but then I get it immediately. It's against Michael Myers, so then just get on the head spin, and it's great. It's what you want. But it was just so fun where I was still kind of questioning by bringing in the young dude, the could be potential new Michael Myers. Right. It's sort of it allows you to get into those themes in a sort of a deeper, fun looking at from a different angle way. Where when you have the scene where Laurie's kind of being the threatening one towards him, where it's like I believe her when she says she's still trying to reach out and save Corey, one last hope. But at the same time, she's given us the sense of like, but you better watch out, kid, because I won't hesitate to pull that trigger. Right. So she's threatening a kid with violence, it feels like, in that scene as well. Just more just kind of like riding a line of all this stuff. But like, all to say too, if it was just Allison versus Michael Myers, like that doesn't feel right, not just because of legacy character reasons, but because of those generational reasons. Allison's supposed to be the one, now she's getting out of this sort of caught up in a violent world, way of looking at things. Right. You get what I'm sort of saying with all this?
Well, I think that one of the big themes that's working within all of what we're talking about, you can kind of reduce down to Corey's character. So Corey is the product of two extremes, literally and figuratively. So he's a good kid to start off, and he has this tragic thing happen that makes the world look at him differently. He didn't really choose that. That's cause and effect. But he's also the product of two people that are very different, right? Like his mom seems problematic. And there's a suggestion, at the very least, that she's been quite abusive to him. And so there's an effect that has on him as well, on his personality. And then I guess it's his dad, right? Or is it like...
I thought it was his dad.
It seemed like it, right? It didn't feel like it was explicitly his dad because of the interaction at the
thought it was
junkyard. But his dad represents kindness, whereas mom represents more a lack of kindness, I guess. And when he's shown kindness, he responds positively. When he's not, he responds negatively. So he's a really sort of clean representation of this binary of good and evil, that he possesses both, but the tide sways him one way or the other depending on what time of day it is, in a way, right?
And like up till the end, right. I didn't know where he was going to go in the end. It was great.
Yeah, and so like when he's pushed by not kind people, he leans toward that. And Laurie, like you're saying, she kind of emboldens him too, right? Because she has that binary of good and evil, and how do I do I retreat and go? It's like the extremes, right? Like, do I live in the extremes, or do I try to live in this sort of middle ground where you can have moments, but like it's not all or nothing. And the first movie is her basically realizing that you can't live only in that extreme. The second movie is Consequence.
Right. She's referring it to as her prison as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And the third movie is her coming to terms with that. So this binary, I'm using that term just, I don't know why, but this binary of good and evil, Corey really is surrounded by examples of that. And he, as a character, I think people are maybe misinterpreting what I think is the point, is that he is an example of the cause and effect of Michael he's not pure evil himself. He is an evil that is causal, right?
And I think maybe you keep using that word binary because that is in the movie where you have later not his dad, but the father of the kid who was killed.
Right.
Remember when she's talking to him and he says, "Oh, well, there is a distinct difference between the boy I knew growing up who cut our lawn and this guy who killed my son."
Like that, the kid that he knew growing up is no longer there. And that is the effect that Michael has had on him. Now, we could totally say the supernatural effect if we want. Like, there is that moment when Michael grabs him and we see all of this trauma in sort of memory like exchange through Michael and Corey.
Yeah.
And we've seen that stylistically used in the past in other films, and we can kind of infer that maybe what's going on is this spiritual supernatural
it's like
transfer.
Suggested that like Laurie may have escaped that. Remember at the end, like Allison says, "I'm not going to let that happen to you," or there's some ideas of like Laurie could have been affected by Michael in the same way. Anyways,
right.
Sorry.
And I mean, I think that's all. To me, I'm more comfortable taking it as metaphor than as literal. But I think you can get away with taking it literal and be, if that floats your boat, great, go for it. Like, let that be the undercurrent that makes you enjoy the story. I've no problem with that. It's just, for me, I'm more likely to be like, oh, cool, this can actually be real. And this is just a sort of a metaphorical representation of the effect that evil is having on everybody.
Yeah.
And I love that because even the end for Corey, his clumsy attempts at being Michael really show that he is not the same as Michael.
Right. And even for whatever fanboy I might be of the horror genre, it never broke the line of like, you remember like at the end of the Indiana Jones 4 how they did the smart thing where it's like everyone thinks Shia LaBeouf's gonna put on the Indiana Jones hat, then Harrison Ford says kid or whatever. He doesn't say that literally, he just takes it, puts on the hat. They never did what that movie didn't do either. They never win against the sort of audience hopes and expectations of like They didn't do that thing where it's like, oh, he is the new Michael Myers.
No.
They didn't do that at all.
Well, and it's purposeful again, like the way, like think about who Corey is killing and why. It's completely different than who and why for Michael. Michael is, how did we describe him I feel like we came up with a pretty like good way of talking about him, but he essentially has one goal. It is not just, he's not killing because he enjoys killing. He's killing because he has a goal, like a linear one direction. I'm heading toward Laurie for this particular reason.
He's often referred to as the most sort of shark-like in that sense.
Right.
But we were talking about in terms of the last one, how it was just all about him getting to that house, which now was knocked down in this one.
Right.
But that had been his previous kind of just aim.
Yeah. And so he's this train in a way. And if you get in the way of the train, you will get run over. And it's not, in a weird way, there's no like intent on killing. Because if everybody just got out of his way, I don't think he'd kill anybody.
Well, it's cool how it does still live up to the monster in him, though, that he is just evil incarnate in some way. Because of the way that he feels like he's able to pass that on to someone else. It's as if it is just evil incarnate trying to stay alive outside of the body.
But Corey is so different, right? Like he thinks he wants to be this thing, but he's almost misusing the power that is given to him in a way, in that he's selfishly just trying to get retribution to all the people who beat him up. So he's a totally different monster.
Yeah. Well, he's on the side, if you sort of look at a dichotomy of like one person's going to go homicidal, another one's going to go suicidal. He in the end is suicidal, and you can
Correct.
see that he's I can't really think of a better way to put it, more emotional type in the way that we think of the word, versus Michael Myers, the more outward type in that sense.
Well, because he actually has emotion, which Michael doesn't seem to have.
Yeah.
Like he's spurred on by the traumas that he's had to go through. And so whenever somebody like picks on him or whatever, it's like he's seeking retribution for that. Michael's never seeking retribution.
Right.
He's just a freight train. He's just going for it.
Well, what does it say about Corey that all the times he's saying, if I can't have her, then no one can? What he meant by that in the end was, I will kill myself, and then for that just means his reality is over as he knows it.
Right. So he's, in a weird way, he's totally opposite of Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like he's selfish and he's, I don't know, self-serving in a lot of ways. He's super conflicted. Michael doesn't seem particularly conflicted.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Right.
that's I don't know. That's
Like he's
that's
trying
obvious.
to kind of play both sides.
Yeah.
Like if Allison could get him and they could leave together, would Corey, let's say before his first kill, would he have been able to just be a person?
I don't know. I'm only thinking in terms now too of how you said the ways they're different, but I think they're really similar too, where you have Michael's original pointed goal is just to exist in the space where he saw his sister having sex, right? And then where he killed her, which was some form of intimacy probably for him. And then now Corey's just all about now running away with his new girl too and starting the better life.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's something I was wondering about, just sort of the how do we explore the origins of Michael's psychosis, I guess, right? And the consistent refrain is that he just was evil to begin with. But I don't know. I feel like we talked about this in the 2 movies ago, probably a bit. But that would he, I don't know, like what caused Michael as a kid to kill his sister?
See, now we're just podcasters like the podcasters in the first movie. We don't want to do that. It's just like...
That's true. But I think that there's something to it. Like, what is the compelling force that is throughout these films? And like, is it, if it's survival, let's say, existing, like you're saying, just wanting to exist, I don't know.
Well, maybe you're getting at, it is easy to forget. It's easy just to think of Michael Myers in terms of how we know him and how we see him as this behemoth monster, pure evil. But it is set up in the canonical original where he's a little kid who wanted to dress up as a clown for Halloween and just somehow, got what feels like a screw loose. It's not like... It's different from like, he's Damien, the devil child or something. That's what more is easy to think of as just he's evil incarnate versus the original Halloween. It's the Rob Zombies movies. Maybe they do it through and through, where it's a super just abusive, horrible household to grow up in.
Right.
So I think that's kind of what we gather from the canonical original here. But he was it seems like he might have been an innocent little kid at some point, which is easy to forget. I'm kind of calling myself out for.
Well, I think that's kind of what I'm, I guess, dancing around a little bit, is like, I've always felt a hesitance to, like, I don't believe in the notion of evil and good in this sort of like abstract way, that it's just that those things just are, that it's like a spectrum and they like exist, one or the other, because it's subjective, right? Like how you're taught to be as a human is how you determine your sense of morality. So if you're taught that killing people is moral, that's your version of being good.
Mm-hmm. Just look at our history.
Right. And so to me, the subjectivity of good and evil is an interesting thing to be contemplating, because we as a society have kind of agreed for the most part that killing people is bad, but we still do it.
Well, it's
And killing other beings and living things is theoretically bad, but we have absolutely no problem doing it.
Well, it's there's a great theme stated quote, or just maybe bringing up stuff about the theme. When Laurie says there's two kinds of evil. There's the thing that happens that like is outside of us that threatens the tribe,
Right.
and then there's the thing that's inside of us. So that's where she's coming from. But I feel like that's kind of like what you're just saying. That feels subjective, though, at the same time, as explored in the previous entry, you know, that the way she puts it, as if it's justified for the tribe if they're threatened to kill evil outside of them. Yet we know that a tribe can kill the wrong person who was just innocently escaped from the insane asylum and they drove to jump off the building.
That's right. Yeah, I think that, look, at the end of the day, I think all of this is to say that I think there are more complex themes within these movies, and maybe a lot of people aren't either interested in that or willing to look at it, you know, just like it's not or really just that their expectation is not to have to go into that headspace.
Well, look at like almost like every kill or sort of sequence like that felt like it was immediately wrapped up with those ideas of where to place the blame or not. Or we have the bullies, where even it was so nice to have Corey call the main bully out. It's like, oh, I know why, you know, your dad hates you, treats you this way. And then that escalates.
That is the point of the movie to me in a lot of ways. That singular statement of like, I know why you're an asshole. And it's because your dad doesn't love you. In fact, he hates you. And everything's coming from that. So it is this causality thing. You know, it's like the effect that people being shitty has on the world, on the people around them, is the point in a lot of ways. And Laurie is trying to come to terms with that and be like, can I grapple with that notion and be a good person still? Like, can I move on? And the answer is really no, you can't move on.
She's not so much grappling with it, though. I feel like she's just come down hard in herself with, I just need to kill Michael Myers, and that ends it.
But that's not where she starts in this movie. That's what I'm saying. It's like she's having to, like, the movie for her, up until Michael actually shows up in her house, is about protecting Laurie or protecting Allison from things like Michael.
Right, because that's what Allison is kind of questioning, if she's helping or hurting, right?
Right. And then so what I'm saying is what Laurie's really grappling with is how much does she go down the rabbit hole of presumption around who is evil or not, right? She's having this instinctual reaction to Corey based on her experiences.
Right, which then Allison calls her out for. What, Mom? Are you just going on, what do you call it? This, intuition? Da, 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 da.
Right. Not everything is about you is
or
sort
grandma.
of like, you know, right, grandma. You know, and that is the big turn between them in their relationship. It's like where Allison is sort of calling her out, being like, so you're going back to this thing that was the problem in the first place, which is obsessive, you know, focus on the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ultimately the journey for Laurie is to find balance between those two things, like the obsessive, you know, protective, what do you call it? Like being completely on guard all the time thing, and letting go of that.
Yeah, you feel that in her dialogue where she's like, yeah, I want you to go off and have a happy life, just not with him. Just not with him. That's all. Then
Right.
coming down hard again.
And that's notion of like trying to exert some sort of control over people is kind of the other side of the coin of how the evil is controlling her.
Yeah.
Right. And so that is this sort of push-pull in her character. And in order to completely exercise that, ultimately, she has to kill the thing that started it in the first place.
But just as far as that push-pull too, and how far is she willing to push things, and how Corey sort of is a way to emblemize all that, where it's not like of course you have to kill Michael Myers. It's less of a question. How, whether it's just like the kids, the bullies that feel like they left Corey for dead. So then when Corey comes back to get them, it's almost, we feel that like justified revenge more. He essentially just killed them. But then when Laurie's having her showdown with Corey, their escalation, you could say, leads to his death, but she's not the one did it. So again, just getting how it's all caught up with the causalness being muddied.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I think it's great. I would watch it again, probably a bunch.
I watched it this morning and / last night too.
Nice.
Just to kind of try to get some more notes down, wrap my head around it all more, see if it was different outside of theaters. I loved Corey sleeping on the same spot where the kid died.
That's so good.
Right?
It's all trauma response, right? Like, it's so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it reminded me too when I loved when it's sort of perfect to get caught up in like what I was saying earlier, how I loved that we're coming in with these characters where are in a place they can have happy moments with each other, yet still like you have this sad, oppressive atmosphere around everything. And then Allison being in that kind of strong place like that, she gets Corey there too, and brings him to the party, and they're having fun, and he's actually like having fun for once since this happened. So it was so great. Yeah, this is so great to the moment where at his peak of feeling happiness at all. Again, we see he runs into the mother of the child he quote unquote killed.
And she's so nasty about it. I remember just feeling kind of sick to my stomach because I'm like, I completely get that she would feel the way she feels.
Yeah.
But the cruelty with which she responds to him being just existing was real. I was like, ugh, I don't like this. Now I don't like her.
Right. But I mean, that moment was just so good for all these themes, and as far as connectivity with each other in terms of then how we carry that trauma and depend on each other, sort of needing empathy maybe to help us
get compassion,
be brought out of it. Yeah,
which the dad tries to have.
Right. Well, we get where she's coming from where it's like, oh, I'm glad to see you having fun because I can never do it for the rest of my life because of what you did.
Right.
But then we know outside more objectively, it's like, well, okay, well, so then is he never, ever, ever allowed to experience any fun ever again?
Yeah, like that's her problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In a way, it's like she has to come to terms with living her life.
Can you imagine? He's just like, well, that's a you problem.
Yeah. You're like, listen, I'm going to have another beer and you can fuck right off.
But just so smart to bring him to that point and then have her confront him.
It's great.
Exist in that same space. I loved
really
it.
Great. And he's not, this is the thing, is like, his character is not super simple, right? He's very complex. His rejection of Allison's, compassion and like desire to help, and not in a like, in that sort of like pity way, but being like, I feel a connection with you and I want to explore that. And him rejecting that, he still comes back the next day, even though he kills a couple of people. But he comes back and he is like, I shouldn't have walked away. right?
yeah.
He's still throughout the movie. You kind of see his what do you call it? His grasp of like right and wrong slide away
Mm-hmm.
as he gets further and deeper into it. But like he has it. It's not, he's not the pure evil thing. He's a product of a lot of bad shit.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives into it much in the same way that the mom is giving into that negativity and that sort of despair.
Yeah.
When, as difficult as I can only imagine it would be, you do have to try and move on when you lose something and when tragedy happens.
And clearly he's affected by guilt deeply if he's like sleeping on that spot where the kid died.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I find him to be incredibly tragic. And so I think the way they played that out, the complexity within which they play it out, and the tragedy of his character makes for a really, really compelling story.
yeah. Well, agreed.
So anybody who thinks otherwise is wrong.
I hope we get some feedback back on this, can read some other opinions here.
That's gonna be my whole new persona is I'm right, you're wrong. There are no opinions. There's what I think, and then everything else is wrong.
I disagree.
Oh!
The kills were great too. The tongue of the DJ going all around on the record, like
That
so good.
was so amazing.
The
Just
flaming the one bully with the torch, the blowtorch.
or yeah, that that whole sequence in the scrapyard, whatever you call it, was amazing. I love when movies give us this subtle hint and then payoff of a weapon or a death to come with the absolute asshole kid who has the drumsticks. The whole time, I was in a movie theater with 2 other people, which was great because we went, I think, at like 3 p.m. And so I felt fairly comfortable like whispering stuff to Britt while we were watching. And I was like, if I don't get a drumstick through an eye or through an ear hole, they have failed. And of course they pay it off. I was like, this is exactly what I want. You're doing all the right things, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thinking in terms of what audiences may have been expecting and being with an audience, it got a good audience reaction when Laurie had the moment where she's like, "Oh, you really think I'd kill myself?
Yeah,
Take
yeah.
that." It was I don't know. It just made me
Yeah,
think.
Britt was like, she's not going to do that, is she? Like, she was really in it. I was like, oh, we'll see.
But I just wondered
Be a
if
bold move.
whoever was with me there in that crowd, was that just the one moment they liked and they hated the rest of the movie, or are they just not the vocal ones online? I'm just
Yeah, I don't
wondering
know.
about it all.
You know what? Another thing that jumped out to me in the visuals of it is the shot. So this is a recurring thing in my nightmares, which is this cement tunnel space. It can come in various forms in my dreams, but for some reason, that type of, it's almost a liminal space. Like, so in this movie, it's the tunnel of the sewage, whatever you call that, the storm drain, I guess you would call it. That cement, dark, long tunnel with like light at the end, sometimes just into like total abyss of darkness in my dreams. But it's such an evocative thing. And there's this shot from the tunnel when Corey and Michael are like grappling with each other. That's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that image, this like of these 2 dipshits pushing each other around because both of them don't know what the hell to do with themselves or with each other, right? They're just having this weird like shoving match.
Yep.
And it's just, I think that feels like the movie to me in a way, like that it is this like grappling of good and evil and thought and like what's right and
Different
what's wrong
generations.
right. Yeah, exactly. Different generations. Yeah. So to me, that whole moment just felt really, really strong and visually compelling and thematically compelling, and like the metaphors felt good. Like I just love all of it. And it's in a space that's super evocative for me because I keep seeing those spaces in my nightmares, which I'm like, great.
It's the perfect place to where Michael Myers has been hiding out. Oh, it was interesting too, though. The homeless guy thought he was like, I'm Michael Myers. Remember
Yeah.
in that line, just as if almost proximity to Michael Myers was contagious, or
Right.
maybe he had a similar moment where some evil opened up to him through some confrontation that he had.
That's interesting. Yeah. It also makes me think about the feeling that you get when you, how do I explain this? How do you explain feelings? Internal despair that we have, I think, can lead to giving in to the total negative like thought. And in a way, to me, it's like this dude, this guy who just, quite old, right? Like he's probably been on the streets for a really long time, is sort of giving into his internal despair. And where he lands is to identify with Michael Myers, insofar as to say, like, I've become and I am Michael Myers. I am like my own despair, my own evil. And I think that's really cool because it kind of speaks to where Corey is, right? Like he is on the path to giving into that. And
Yeah.
Michael, again, represents the bottom in a way. Especially living in the cave, like at that point, like he's the bottom of the, if there's like a scale of like the shadow self all the way up to like the altruistic, version of whatever, ascension or something. Like Michael's way down at the bottom.
And I love it when Corey goes in deciding he wants the mask and he's all, you give me that. And Michael's he's just standing there when you're thinking like, what is he doing this whole time? Is he like eating deer or like, what is he doing with his time? But to see he's just straight up standing there was just the nice kind of like visual reminder. Michael Myers is just like an insane, that is what he does.
Yeah.
Because you remember the 2018
the
one.
opening of that movie, right? Like he just stands in the courtyard in his little square.
Yep, exactly. Ugh, it was great.
It really is great.
I loved that Laurie did not die.
Yep.
And as sort of things I definitely wanted from this one that did deliver. Laurie not dying, given some kind of semblance of maybe having a romance with this guy too. It was great.
Yeah.
And seeing, kind of already mentioned it, but seeing Michael Myers like get ground up. Not just for this story, but I feel like that's the thing we've always wanted to see in the final chapter of any horror movie ever. That's not ever, but these franchises where it's all about killing the monster at the end, where it's like, well, just put it in a thing that does that to it.
Yeah, it's the blow it out the goddamn airlock sort of version of things.
Yeah.
Just on Earth.
Yeah. So to have that moment, it was just giving us what we wanted, ended on the perfect note too, with the mask. It's just still there. So as we know, like they said, evil will always be there in some regard.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Great.
yeah. Let's not
feel like that's good to wrap up this section on.
Of course.
And wrap it up even further, or move along further with our next section. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
Okay, so to your point just then on the finality of it, did you like or dislike that there wasn't one last ankle grab
You mean when he was on the?
So right before she pushes him into the grinder.
Oh no!
I kept thinking to myself, "Oh man, she's dangerously close to this."
No man,
thing.
that would have totally broken the reality of all
Really?
three of these movies for me.
But would it have solidified the supernatural side of it?
It would have made a hard choice. Yeah. It would have made an obvious, like, this is beyond reality. It would have, he's definitely supernatural if after the throat slit and the wrist slit.
Right. No, so to me, the movie really is kind of, leaning in to solidify that he is still just a dude.
Yeah. I mean, hey, now that you mention it, that could have been, I maybe would have liked that bold choice in a way. That could have been fun. It's like, clearly, gotta remove the head. You gotta dismantle the whole body.
That's right.
He is a zombie.
Now, having said that I guess I'm sort of suggesting that didn't work, that they didn't do that, but not really. It's just like the one thing that kind of, I was like, oh, did they miss an opportunity?
Because it was a nice moment that did happen where he starts strangling her at the end of their little fight.
That's right, yeah. But I think the effectiveness, I guess I'm just going back to the thing that worked through that, the effectiveness of having her stand on that platform over this thing that is the finality, that is the danger, was enough to go, oh shit, is this going to happen? Is he going to come back one last time? And having him not, and having her be able to push his body into the grinder safely and not get pulled in as well, or at least almost pulled in, makes it feel better, right? Because it's a perfect setup. Set up the fear source, make us worry about it, and then have it be, in this case, because it's the end, have it be resolved, have it dissolve into positivity.
Wait, sorry, I just lost you. How did we get here? This is what did not work. And what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, because of him not coming back and grabbing her, my initial thought is that potentially didn't work.
But now you're okay with it.
But I'm okay with it because of the effect it had on
Okay.
us.
The only little thing I had, which is it's at the level of, I feel like I can't hold it against this film at all. So I thought it was really smart to have her writing the book and that narration, because it allowed for this kind of tone and speaking about things in these terms that is true to the series of sort of this like poetic grandness and speaking about things in terms of good and evil and whatnot. Like that just worked for me in the form of her writing in book, because you would speak that way when writing a book. But I kind of like how a lot of people, were bugged by the evil dies tonight refrain in Halloween Kills, which for me, I'm like, no, that is how these mobs work. It totally worked. Yeah, certain lines in this one where someone would say, oh, he was possessed by evil, when dude kept saying, oh, if I can't have her, no one can. Where even though that kind of dialogue in terms of thinking feels true to the series, you just don't have Donald Pleasance, and it just does. He's the one that made all that work for the originals. He keeps popping up at like all the sequels till he passed away, which is great. But he was like, God, I can't think of many actors who can do that kind of thing. But he was one of them, and to sort of completely keep this sense of it could be in our reality, you need a Loomis to sort of pull off that kind of dialogue or just ways of describing something. And so it's cool that I just have to sort of remind myself at points in this one where it's like, okay, right, well, this is true to Halloween, but it just maybe isn't clicking because we don't have a Donald Pleasance this time around, unfortunately. Which is a minor complaint, and it's hard to hold against the movie because we don't have him anymore.
Right.
But this is something I was aware of.
Yeah, my only it's very thin, I guess. But and I know why it is the way it is. It's sort of a matter of efficiency and storytelling that you're trying to get into a 2-hour movie. The turn that Allison's character has to like really being upset with Laurie and being like, I'm out of here, felt quick, where I'm like, oh shit, like she's actually like really throwing it in Laurie's face. And I was like, does this feel right? It feels rushed. It feels a little out of character for Allison.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there just wasn't quite enough build up of them having like a riff between them.
I feel like you have to be pretty plugged into their motorcycle love story to just kind of be on board with where she is.
Well, I don't want to diminish her as a dimensional character by saying she was just, wrapped up in motorcycle love.
Isn't that? But I mean, I get it. I'd get that,
Yeah. Yeah. It seemed difficult to buy, I guess, fully, that she would turn on Laurie in the way that she does. I just was like, this, from all of the things, maybe what it is that that if there was one other scene, just one scene where like the specter of Judy Greer kind of was the topic of or the source of some conflict between Laurie and Allison, that like something, it's a wedge, right? And it could have been placed in there by Corey, but like to have just a little bit more history wedge shoved in between them may have made me not feel quite like, oh damn, this
just
is
to
a pretty
remind
quick
us,
turn.
just to remind us that Allison's probably coming from a place where her mom would at any given point more than Laurie would.
Yeah. Like, not to be cliche, and I don't think you want to do this exactly, and I don't think they really did this, but you in a way you want the scene where she's like, you're not my mother. My mother's fucking dead because of you, which they kind of almost do. But I get why as a writer you don't do that. Like, that's too on the nose and too cliche. But that's the sentiment, I think, of that is kind of where you could have gotten a little bit more leeway in understanding why she's so quick to be like, I'm out of here with this dude. Fuck you, Laurie.
Sure.
Fuck you, Grandma.
I get that.
So honestly, that's like my only complaint.
All right, then let's move on. Last section here. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Something fun I noticed watching it a second time through was the first line, I guess, of the movie was when Corey shows up to babysit. The mom says, Corey, you're a lifesaver, is the first line.
I really think Danny McBride and this writing team are really good.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a fan of Danny McBride.
I love Danny McBride. He's fucking hilarious.
In the grocery store scene where they're talking about veggies and meats and having their meat cute, Don't Fear the Reaper, which plays for the end credits, is playing, but in a Muzak style. It's funny. This is maybe another kind of borders on what worked. I mean, yeah, it's easy to say, sort of simple, easy to say how, it's good how this film portrays like an older woman a certain way and just putting her in a certain light that, isn't the frail, helpless old woman or whatever. Right. And I just noticed how it was doing that though, in a way that's more than intellectual, to actually kind of experience it in a movie, which is just so important. Like, I just kind of was aware of my own bias in a way where I just feel like it's sort of, this trilogy as a whole has almost helped shift, where like by the end of this one, when they're having their fight, like I've gone from maybe more of a default, like, oh yeah, older women, they're, a sort of frail, immediate feel to them, when really it should be like anyone who has heft and is still healthy. I'm like, no, she feels sturdy to me. Like, she looks older with gray hair or whatever, but like she now this someone like this feels like just a sturdy being versus just inherently frail. But still, it's great. You're having her look like a grandma cutting up the jack-o'-lantern. Like it's carving the jack-o'-lantern. It's fun.
Yeah.
So I just checking in on that and how that was it's cool, just in a more experiential way. I think helps like a visual way helps to sort of change those biases, whatever.
Yeah. Agreed.
Are you just reading something?
No, I have not. I just have nothing to nothing to add.
Well, I got a question for you then.
Okay.
How could you continue these films? Because this is another case of where I just don't feel like you should in our day and age.
Well, when you say continue,
I mean rebooting it again, whatever, doing new Halloween movies.
I don't know. I just wouldn't.
Right.
Wouldn't. I would, if I was, I mean, the problem I think always comes up with ownership of IP and the potential loss of that ownership if you don't make a new one. A lot of contracts are like that. And then that sort of,
but
forces the
creatively
hand.
speaking, whatever.
Yeah. Creatively, I wouldn't do it.
Right.
I just wouldn't do it. If I was a writer or a filmmaker trying to make a Halloween movie, I would make it about something else. I wouldn't make a Halloween. I wouldn't continue this franchise. I would try to come up with something new.
As far as it's a slasher film set at Halloween.
Yes, exactly.
I agree.
I think you can, what you can do is you can imbue your story with elements that work from this franchise or even nods. Like I love homage.
I pose that question feeling like you couldn't actually answer it until 10 years from now,
right?
Kind of thing. But I'm kind of want to get at it with since I can't talk about James Bond normally on this this podcast, I'm going to kind of use as an opportunity where that was my first question. Like the other, I mentioned, is another one I saw. Grauman's Chinese, had a great time here. I was super into all the Daniel Craig Bond movies. Yeah. Going like when it ended, how would they reboot James Bond? Because it feels like the new Craig movies were sort of about getting James Bond like caught up with our modern world in a way, right? Like he's gone through that, and great, do that for the better. And also there's just some subtle things in it like that connect to the way I was talking about violence and being portrayed now as a viable option. And also in terms of like having bad guys in the world, like thinking James Bond, the 80s movies and even through the 90s movie, it's all great to have it kind of be like, it can be hokey, just whatever. They're the Soviets, and it's more like in movie comic book terms, it's all good and fine. But by the end of this last James Bond movie, when he's like running up the staircase, fighting off the guards, it's like when he shoots them, it's like you hardly see their faces. It's almost like these people he's killing are sort of become non-people. It's just about the action, and it's kind of just like overlooking this question now of you can't just like, I don't know, portray people as just bad guys if you're trying to be that realistic anymore. So I'll say, I think this now we're in a similar boat where something like Halloween, it feels you'd have to start from a very, very modern place in a way. So I just don't even know if you could or should right now. And
I have two opinions about what you could or what I would like to see in terms of James Bond. I think they should continue the through line of this franchise that Daniel Craig is now dead, his character is dead, and call it 007 and have it be about the position, and have Lashana Lynch, who was amazing in No Time to Die, carry on the mantle. And it's not a James Bond movie anymore, it's a 007 movie, and have that go wherever it needs to go. I think she 100 billion% can carry a franchise. She's fucking amazing. And then I would also do a reboot of James Bond, the character, and put it in as a period piece.
Tim, that's my idea too. I was like, do James Bond as a period piece.
Yes, go back to the, I don't know, go back to either World War II or even World War I and make it about I don't need to see him as a young dude, but I want to see the sort of evolution of the position through him.
Yeah,
I want to see gadgets and spycraft in that more antiquated way.
I want to see it basically like doing reboots of the early Sean Connery ones, of having it set in that kind of like early 60s, like transitional time.
I'd go even further. I think I'd go into the 40s or 50s.
To start, yeah.
Then you get to see it from this almost the original intention too, right? Like the Ian Fleming novels, they seem like they take place.
Well, anyway,
in the
that's why.
50s-ish.
So now, since that is my idea too that I've had for how to reboot James Bond,
I don't think we're alone in that. There's a school of people who I think are wanting that.
Well, you're the first one I've heard. I've been trying to spread the gospel or to pitch it to people.
I can't remember which guy it is, but there's a podcast called
Well, anyway, that's why I'm now thinking from, okay, so can you just apply that across the board to things like, in this case, Halloween, have it be just a 70s set movie again? And is that, at that point, is that almost redundant because then we do have the original Halloween?
In this particular case, I think it becomes redundant because in the James Bond sense, I think that there's leeway to go even further.
Well, James Bond, it's like we have so much of it. It is about the technology, not just that's in the movie, but how it's made. Like we can do scenic shots better, action shots better, just like all that. So
yeah, I don't know.
But that original
I don't
atmosphere,
want to see another Halloween. Like, I don't want more of this.
I don't either.
So maybe that, in 10 years or something, we'll feel differently. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just depending on the state of the world and all that. If explorations of evil in terms of how Michael Myers embodies that are actually pertinent still in some interesting way. But I don't know.
To me, this is such an interesting, weird thing to contemplate, too, because, like, for example, I read Clockwork Orange when I was in high school, and I was like, oh man, this is amazing. I love this book, even though the author has sort of famously said it's his worst book, and that he hates it. He hates that people like it. But I remember thinking as a young film kid that I was like, I really like Stanley Kubrick's version of it, but it's not very similar to the version in my head when I read the book. And I was like, damn, I would love to remake a film version of A Clockwork Orange. But in saying that, it seems completely absurd, right? Like you're going to remake a Stanley Kubrick.
No, you're going to adapt a book.
Right. But like you're bound, you're tied in a weird way to this thing, right? Like this, like when...
I mean, that happened with The Shining.
Exactly. And so I'm, when I see the examples of times that it's been done, my first reaction is to be like, oh, that should just never be done. But then we get this trilogy of Halloween movies, which in a way are kind of doing it. Not exactly, but they're doing that thing, like revamping this franchise in this case. And it completely works. So I don't know. I really don't know. Like if somebody can show up and do another Halloween movie that is its own thing, but still holds true to like why Halloween movies are great, I guess, sure.
Just, call skeptical as of now. Yeah.
Right.
Or curious at least.
Yeah. I mean, we watched Rob Zombie's versions of it and I thought they were okay. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't the right person. Maybe the right person comes along and nails it. Great. But for now, I would not touch it.
Well, speaking of The Shining reboot and its director, Mick Garris, who has the podcast Postmortem with Mick Garris, I was sure to listen to Jamie Lee Curtis's episode that just came out.
Ooh.
And it was just fun to hear at the end, kind of closed out the interview where she was getting very teary-eyed just about how much Laurie has given her, as well as just feeling connected with how much Laurie has meant to so many people, as far as just a sort of icon or character, and just feeling really in touch with that. And she was getting very moved by all that. And not only was that just nice, fun to hear, but just kind of struck me about how we're always checking up with the value of horror films, and to think we've just had this trilogy or this whole, 13 film series, whatever. It's all about some sort of possibly evil incarnate being, and it's just being. And it's just cool that the positive inverse can come out of that, of just her sort of, reminding me of how, much people can kind of get a sense of hope or thinking better of themselves, or getting help overcoming struggle, whatever it may be, through these sort of icons of horror, and Laurie being a big one. But how that's only possible if something is about just horrific evil in a way, or can inversely be proportional to that. The invert, that's what I was looking for. So anyway, that was cool to hear.
That's great.
Yeah. Great.
Mick Garris is cool.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good show.
He's a very strange dude.
Yeah.
I like his style though.
Yeah. Were you seeing him in the interview show that you're watching?
Yep.
Okay, great.
I'll talk about.
Cool. All right. Well, we can wind down here with some recommendations. I'll recommend Dead. I got a big list. I've been seeing a lot of good things, but I'll start with Anna Lilia Mirpour's new film. I don't think I recommended that last time. Yeah, Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon. It was great. You like her movies? Check it out. Go rent it, support it. This is my favorite of hers yet.
Cool. That's great. I've been watching the 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time.
That's what I meant. If you're seeing Mick Garris there.
Yep. Yeah, he's in it a bunch. I am, I think, on episode 6. Maybe I'm on 5. Either way, it's really fun. I would just, I guess, warn you that you're gonna get spoiled if you haven't seen, some of these movies. So I kind of try to be a little like navigate around those if I haven't seen it and I don't want to be spoiled. But it's really well done. It's so funny. We're sitting there watching it, and I'm like, I know like 6 of the interviewees personally.
Cool.
It's so weird to see people that it's amazing. I love it that there are these, there's a bunch of people on there that I've either met or, still in contact with. And like, damn, I want to get on one of these shows and talk about horror films. It looks so fun.
Well, we're doing it here, Tim.
That's right.
So if you're still here, thanks.
Yeah. But yeah, the show's really fun. It's really well produced, and I agree with a lot of their takes on it. It's a good ride.
Cool. Great. Well, we'll see what we're back with 2 weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
But we hope everyone joins us then. In closing, whether Halloween has ended or not, thanks for listening.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.